Good evening, dear friends. Welcome, dear Bilgehan.
Greetings, dear Tülin. We are together again in the Divine Order and the Universe Reading and Commentary series.
Yes, it is good to be together again. This evening, we will delve into the topics of the Plan of Duty, the cadres of duty. The passages we will read and discuss are mostly about this question, from where we come and to where we go. The knowledge given in those passages intend to develop our understanding a little bit more about the structures of the realms or levels our being will pass to and assume duties after our graduation from this world school, or after completing this human stage. Of course, experiencing that state will be totally different than talking about it. Before we start reading, would you like add something?
In the videos of last month, Bülent Cantor mentioned many interesting points and shared many slides he prepared, with notes and explanations. I advise you, dear friends, please watch those videos. Yes, now, we say that our life in the superficial time is a subjective development. So, I say this life of mine is subjective. In this subjective life, human beings practice for gaining merit. Each individual, all over the world. With our current level of comprehension, of course, we cannot understand, but we can only get an intuition about what is merit and how it is valid in the higher levels of the plan of duty. Still, I think that at this last phase of our lifetimes in the human stage, most of the knowledge we will gain is actually intuitions about the principles in the plan of duty. So, please, let's try not to visualize some concepts we will read about as fixed geometric shapes or figures. Especially, when you hear matter universe, don't think a sphere or a glass globe. I mean, all 3D geometric objects are still variations of the hydrogen atom cosmos, and we cannot find a modeling to explain the whole universe by using the variations of the hydrogen cosmos. So, please, as we try our best to gain some intuitions, instead of geometric shapes that are world matter, subjective matter, we better to imagine or meditate upon images much more akin to energy and the objective matter.
I notice this mistake sometimes in the questions our friends ask, and even in our own discussions and descriptions. When we talk about our being, not our body, but our essence being, people keep on thinking or imagining it as this physical body, as if a continuity of this body. Our brains ask for a concrete thing. When you say imagine or visualize, the whole background of our mental and emotional infrastructure becomes involved in shaping that imagination. For example, the divine order in the universe describes the being as an ensemble of influences and high energies. And you say, imagine this as energy. Yet, what do? Right away, we go for a concrete imagery. We like to imagine it as a body, as if it is a person up there.
Yes, we like to think as an object that has definite boundaries.
Yes, we do. Under these worldly conditions, this is due to our brain's way of perception, yet this definition is not limited what our brains could imagine. Still, when we say the being is a perceptual point at which the acquisitions and essence knowledge of all those 500 to 700 lifetimes, the first example I can think of right now is a databank, but still, this has a shape, a 3D image. But maybe, the cloud where we restore our digital data is a better image. Thanks to the information technologies, thinking about networks, clouds make it easier for us to widen our rigid frames. Metaverse is another example. People create digital realities with their thoughts and imagination in which they digitally live in. Yes, we see such examples as preparations for the plan of love, but still, we don't know what imaginations is.
As I listened to your words, I had a light bulb moment. Yes, metaverse is a good example, but I think internet as an idea is much better. Because, if you ask me to show what internet is, it is not so tangible. Yes, data is carried back and forth via cables laid on the seabed, but still it is a system work on a network. Yes, it is not tangible, but via this system information becomes accessible. Still, this is just an example.
Maybe all those imageries as examples we come up with, such as networks, internet, etc., point to the spread of a high-level influence mechanism, and through our intuitions about it, we concretize it in accordance with the world system. And if we think about knowledge, is it concrete? Yes, information is abundant and accessible now, but which part of all those information is truly knowledge for the development of humankind? Nevertheless, this evening, we will again ask many questions, and also use many symbols, examples, etc. to discuss many topics and concepts. Just remember that these are still limited, molded, conditioned ideas, but we will continue to glean some meaning from all of these, because our main purpose in this series is to widen such meanings as much as possible. This is an important effort we need to make. Alright, let's start reading. Now, let us state the way of occurrence of the merits of these obligations. We have said that the being's first step into their unity of comprehensions in the universe, under the necessities of the mechanism of destiny, begins at the plan of duty, and we have said that this is the comprehension's attainment or realization of the necessities, truths. So, the imperative which results in the being's obligation of duty is because of this realization. These realizations advance together with perceptual time mechanism. And the beings in duty are already subject to the conditions of perceptual time and space. It is because the realization, which we symbolized with the symbolic projector, means the adaptation of comprehensions to the original necessities. Initial realizations start at the initial stages of the plan of duty and by gradually rising, reach its final scope at the unitary. Therefore, the beings rising by climbing up the beam of the original principal light which ascends to the universe, means the adaptation of comprehensions to all necessities that exist within the scope of those light beams, their entering into its harmony and increasingly merging into that harmony in wider scope. When this climbing reaches the last boundary of possibility of the universe which we call the unitary, then that being's comprehension has adapted to all necessities contained by this beam of light, has become complete in harmony and consequently attained a state of prevalence over the parts and the whole of universe. That is, it has merged into that great harmony as if it has become the universe itself. Thus, starting from the first stage of the plan of duty, as the beings gradually climb up the original principal light, they enter states of prevalence over the universe parts at degrees of their harmony with the points they are in. And this prevalence is completed within the unitary.
Now, the analogy I will use is not the mechanism of the plan of duty, of course, but I still think the quantum processing is a part of the mechanism of the plan of duty, because, even though in a veiled or obscured manner, in this book, we read the collapse of the waveforms in the quantum physics into forms of particle and space. Because of this field in the quantum physics is very important for us to understand this book better. Alright, let me talk about quantum computers. They process data in qubits. Quantum computers are hard to build, they do not work or process data as ordinary computers do. They are not binary as ordinary computers, they can do multiple processing in a short period of time, like, it is either 0 or 1 and also both 0 and 1. They work better with states that contain options and choices. Let me try to give an example for this with this short video. Unless you see a labyrinth from above, you need to check every turns and the cul-de-sacs you encounter, you memorize them so you don't retake these, until you find the exit. Or you program a robot or a computer by giving the command of mapping it in order not to retake cul-de-sacs, etc. By checking and eliminating all options, a human or a computer eventually finds the exit. However, if you do this process by qubits, all options are checked at the same time. And please understand that this feat is not a talent, or is not about speed. Therefore, if we apply this analogy to our knowledge about the plan of duty, then when all possibilities can be seen at once, then making a mistake is out of question. I mean, then you don't deliberately enter an obvious cul-de-sac. We, in the world, enter cul-de-sacs because we don't see. In case, you may think that then, the beings in duty observes us from above as if we are in a reality show or under a microscope. Of course, it is not like this, but with our limited comprehension, we can only think in this way. Actually, there is no up and down, or above and below, but for ages, we are conditioned to think like this. A result of the superficial time comprehension, a result of the spatial geometry which is 3D plus time. Therefore, as to the labyrinth, no one looks at it from above. This is not about geometry, in the quantum level, because all possibilities can be processed simultaneously, it appears as if someone sees the exit from above. Now, if I use this qubit processing analogy to understand the plan of duty, all those applications, renderings, executions of all those myriad information by the mechanism of destiny in the spherical spacetime is without error. How come? Because, all possibilities and everything that need to happen are incessantly added to the data soup flux, again and again, and because of this, no mistake is made. Yet, this errorless state does not mean that the beings in duty within this cadre will be exempt from tests and trials related to the duty they need to fulfill. Within their level of comprehension, they are tested, as well, but it is certain that those tests and trials are not the ones we know of. Why? Yes, I think, the processing of information from the whole universe is so fast and so encompassing that we intuit it as all-knowing. After all beings in duty are in that level. The mechanism of destiny works in the spherical spacetime.
Yes, as you said, those cadres in duty receive all those myriad information. And the level of comprehension they have and the infinite possibilities the spherical spacetime provide them with an immensely vast scope of prevalence over all the cause and effect chains those information lead to or result from. Hence, the cadres of duty can process all those information by taking account the needs and necessities of the individual being, as well as of the system, a matter milieu etc. via the mechanism of destiny. It means they gained the merit of such high level of intervention in the working of the systems. Maybe, it is better to talk more about merit. In this passage we read, we can easily understand that reaching such a level of merit gradually occurs. It does not happen right away at the first step of the plan of duty. Therefore, until reaching such a level, there have been myriad efforts made in many levels. Consequently, within the content of such merit there are stages that have been completed properly and internalized entirely. This requires a being to complete all those stages of development, plant stage, animal stage, human stage, all intermediary plans between those stages, all levels of the plan of love, and to gain all necessary lessons and experiences of all stages, in order to include these impressions and information as essence knowledge, and reflect back to its spirit. Yet, how things are in our world. Nepotism and favoritism prevail in many fields of life. We see many people at many positions without any apparent merit. So, when we talk about merit in the spiritual sense, we mean that a being deserves that level, not only by making all necessary efforts for getting developed throughout all necessary stages, but also that being comprehends that the scope of its responsibilities and obligations is widened accordingly, because at that level a being has to embrace, encompass and master all levels of those previous developmental stages. In that sense, the being is not given a duty but takes the duty. Because the being is now a part of that harmony, this comes naturally.
Another point we need to emphasize here is adaptation of comprehensions to necessities. To all necessities. This is a profound phrase. It expresses reaching a level of comprehension that comprehends what needs to be, and also that completely harmonized with what needs to be, one of the most significant characteristics of the cadres of duty. As I mentioned earlier, let's not think geometrically about our universe, as though it is a space with rigid limits. Because space is a construct only within the hydrogen cosmos. However, the universe is in the spherical or perceptual spacetime. And we read here. Last boundary of possibility of the universe. not the last boundary. So, this passage does not talk about a geometrical fact with limits. We read in this passage the last boundary of the stage a spirit can reach in its evolution by acquiring knowledge and comprehensions in the matter universe. As we read here, complete in harmony and consequently, attained a state of prevalence over the parts and the whole of universe. That is, it has merged into that great harmony as if it has become the universe itself. Now, the word unity is mistakenly thought as the level of God. I think some concepts from Sufism or pantheism lent to this mistake. After all, the divine order and the universe explicitly states that for the beings there is no such state, at all. Yes, there is a state at the unitary, but this uppermost point of the universe is not God. It is a state of unity that is the last field of application of the matter universe where all cadres of beings that acquired the knowledge of all universe gather and merge as a unity of comprehensions. So, please don't mistakenly think unitary as the seat of the absolute creator. We need to leave such thinking, pantheism etc. behind. This book talks about becoming the matter universe itself, and a spirit that reached the last boundary of the last possibility of application becomes one with the unitary, a kind of singularity or nothingness. Actually, even in the cruder levels of matter universe, we are also becoming the mechanism itself that we need to comprehend, otherwise we couldn't utilize those mechanisms in the previous stages of development. When we were a plant body, then we were the plant body itself, also, as the animal body. And now, as human bodies, we again become the human body itself in order to comprehend it. Yes, this will continue like this in the Plan of Duty, as well. And, if you notice, the book mentions the widening of the comprehension. And this expresses the true process of spreading, expanding, permeating throughout the matter universe in order to become the universe itself. Comprehension is the ferment of the being, and this widening or development continues until the unitary, and then, from that unity of comprehensions, all those influences in accordance with the evolutionary necessities that are determined by the sublime principles filtered through the unitary and kept on permeating the whole universe for the development of beings, and the evolution of spirits.
Another point striking my attention here is this sentence of the beings rising by climbing up the beam of the original principle light which ascends to the universe, means the adaptation of comprehensions to all necessities that exist within the scope of those light beams. They're entering into its harmony and increasingly merging into that harmony in wider scope. Starting from the initial pages of this book, we read that between spirit and matter there is only indirect contact, and this is via influences. And last year, in the first 30 or so videos in this series, we discussed that the initial influence arrives at the amorphous matter to initiate motion is the original influence that filtered through the unitary. So, the cone of light symbolizes that mechanism of influence, and this word of climbing expresses the efforts of the beings for becoming harmonized with that influence mechanism. Was it last year when you shared that short clip of those metronomes? At first, each of them started in different times, but after a while, 2 of those metronomes were harmonized, then slowly other followed and finally even the last one working differently became synced with others. Such examples show that even in our tangible, concrete world reality, mechanism and systems adapt to each other within a certain rhythm. We see such examples subtler versions of matter, as well, emotions and feelings. When someone is sad and crying, suddenly we feel sad as well, or when we hear joyful laughter of children, we feel happy as well. After all, crude or finer, everything is of matter. Sometimes we see that fear brings people together, and sometimes we see that fear separates people. Because we live in a world of duality, we synchronize with disharmony as well as with harmony. We swing to both ends of the pendulum. Despite these swings in the pendulum of duality, becoming of that harmony means making great efforts, which is symbolized with this word climbing. It means for us to become harmonized with the incoming influences, to become flexible in the face of those influences, to internalize, to absorb them. And the act of climbing is gradual, step-by-step process, so it also points to gaining merits. In other words, we cannot become of that harmony by staying at the square one. And, in the rock climbing, two types of ropes are used, static and dynamic ropes. Static ropes don't stretch, so they are good for ascending. Dynamic ropes stretch, so they are good for absorbing the impact if a climber falls. And these ropes are like the conscience mechanism. We learn climbing better and better as we go up a little and fall down a little, or by developing our conscience, by choosing either from the intuition of duty or from the sensuality, and by living the events those choices bring to us.
Yes, and at this point, I'd like to give an example. You know, there are many books written about the law of attraction, and the theory was we would attract the things we want to our life. We assume that we attract things to ourselves. Why? Because of our self-centered thinking, we are at the center of things, and they will be attracted to us. Actually, the real law of attraction is all about this becoming of that harmony. Let me exaggerate a little. You want to buy a house. Now, you will imagine that house. You will imagine yourself as already living in that house. You will imagine how happy you are in that house. You will imagine entering the rooms in that house. You will direct your feelings and emotions regarding this imagination of that house. Of course, that house will not move towards us inch by inch. What we do is to become harmonized with that house. How? By our power of imagination and anchoring our emotions to that imagery, we direct and orient finer particles toward its occurrence in our life. This is how we discover this becoming of that harmony, starting from such applications in the cruder matter combinations. As I mentioned earlier, we utilize all tools and devices we learn to use by comprehending these in the matter universe. This is one of the fastest ways of adaptation that is needed for the applications of higher levels, which we will be doing in the plan of love, and of receiving the intuitions of the plan of duty. In short, there is nothing coming to us, becoming attracted to us. On the contrary, by our efforts in persistent imagination, we collapse its wave function.
Yes, still, we are approaching such knowledge from the sensuality, from the earthly craving side of our innate duality unit. I mean, we make such imaginations, but when nothing happens, when the things or persons we try to attract our life don't manifest, we say, oh, this doesn't work. This is only woo-woo. Yet, we miss an important point. Is this thing or person I want to attract a true need of my being? Is it something really widen my and my being's comprehension? What is my intention as I want this thing or person in my life? This thing or person I desire to attract, from where will it take me and carry me to which point in my development? Yes, in general we want things and we want to have them, yet most of the time, our intention is sensual, carnal, materialistic, or selfish. When readers began to doubt the efficiency of those books you mentioned, some other books were written on the reasons why the first books didn't work. These new books were defining other requirements of the law of attraction, the level you must imagine from, the reasons and purposes you have, how long and at which intensity you need to imagine or visualize the desired outcome, etc. Yes, even for a small thing we want to attract to our life, there are so many things to define within our inner world that the level of comprehension we are in is not sufficient to define these properly. Still, we have many examples in our life, showing us how this law works, sometimes for seemingly bad and sometimes for good results. Nevertheless, both cases teach us many important things about this power of ours. I mean the effect of repeated imaginations on our sicknesses and on our healings.
As a reply to our dear friend that asking why the beings in duty don't intervene me as I make efforts for things that will not help me. Well, I think, when such attempts don't realize or manifest, it is a good intervention already. Still, we have freedom to choose, remember. Because of this, they don't intervene, they don't stop us so we can learn from the consequences of our efforts, our choices, be it beneficial or adverse. And we learn. We learn so much with each choice we make. This may be a spiritual learning. This may be a financial learning in business life. This may be a natural learning while we are weeding the garden. It may be about anything. I mean, we gain experiences from each moment, from each particle of the matter universe. Of course, this is not like learning physics or mathematics in the school. Our true learning goes beyond that. It is a necessity of the comprehension that will be utilized by the spirit, of the comprehension that is wide enough to permeate and become the matter universe itself, and to encompass all those finest details such as the quantum processing that can be used in the plans of duty.
What prevents humankind from becoming of that harmony? Let alone that harmony, what prevents each of us to have and maintain some harmony? Well, as individuals and as the whole humankind, we resist to change, we refuse change, we want to sustain the status quo, we evade and escape from the possibility of small unities, let alone becoming of that harmony. And even if we had a transpersonal experience and lived a trace of that harmony, we may arrive at states of denial after processing such experiences with rational justifications. We don't own our own experiences. In short, we are in such a turmoil of feelings, emotions, thinking that we are unaware that we are out of harmony with ourselves, with others, with nature. Thankfully, this seemingly turmoil has all kinds of lessons for human beings to learn, because as we read many times in this book, the beings advance by choosing either side of their conscience mechanism, either from the intuition of duty side, or from the sensuality, the earthly craving side. Even through our most selfish, most self-centered choices teach us, even if the consequences we have to live through become suffering and harsh, life is abundant with shocking, suffering, troubling events as the results of our choices and actions made from the negative side of our conscience mechanism. Again, unless we change and stop resisting to change, life events push, nudge and shock us as reminders saying, wake up, you are out of universal harmony, you are not aligned with your own being, with your life plan. And not only individual level, but communal level as well. Natural disasters are also lessons for communities that neglect, ignore, disregard and deny the consequences of their communal actions and choices. Just think about earthquakes and Japanese people. They are a good example that human beings can properly learn from past experiences. As their country gets devastated with great earthquakes and subsequent great fires, in time, they learned to build better houses and buildings with more safety measures put in place. And this is only a worldly example of myriad preparations, or applications human beings do for widening their comprehensions. As we do this more and more, we get developed technologically, sociologically, psychologically by unknowingly copying the mechanisms of higher levels. The only difference may be that, when we are not aligned with our individual and communal plans, we tend to err, to make mistakes, and then, we must encounter the consequences of such actions and choices. However, an organization that governs a solar system or a nebula is not like, oh, we made a mistake, let's correct this in the next eon. They are already at the level of proper agency and efficacy. Yes, I wanted to remind our dear friends that our existence in this world of duality as human beings that can learn from opposing factors is so precious.
After all, mistakes are the result of the superficial time perception. I mean, in the spherical time, in the plan of duty, that state of past, present and future happen at the same moment prevents the possibility of making mistakes. Such a perception makes it a state of all-knowing. And also, I'd like to add that, when we look at the human history, we see the examples of changes in the humankind's governance or ruling systems as the human comprehension widens. The pinnacle of this development is democracy, but we see that only a few countries adapt to this government system. Most of the countries cannot sustain democratic processes. As you said, we are doing applications and preparations of widening our comprehensions to gain merit of assuming duties in the higher plans. If we intuitively copy the mechanism of higher plans, then, there must be a level of governance beyond the best examples of democracy we could see so far. Maybe, what we see as social unrest is a sign of such a yearning of the peoples. So, the next level of governance system for human beings requires a level of comprehension that individuals will not need a ruler or a governing body. I don't think there is not a country like this in the world yet, but the state I talk about is like this. The whole nation shares the responsibility, they rule together in cooperation and collaboration. Yes, such a state looks similar to how cadres in duty in the Plan of Duty become organized. Of course, we can only see small examples of such cooperation and collaboration in our world. In general, human beings find the hegemony of a single ruler acceptable and even admirable, and this indicates how far away we are from the comprehension of the Plan of Duty. Sometimes, we see examples of such self-regulated groups in small communities and societies. They don't need a leader, and the members work for the welfare of the whole group by having a complete understanding of their individual and communal responsibilities, and consequently, without needing rules and laws for regulating their actions. If such a group or society does not rely on the abilities and motivational charisma of a single ruler but acts and lives as an application of togetherness, then, it means that they are very near to complete hydrogen cosmos or the human stage, and that they reached a state to receive more and more intuitions and sublimating influences from the plan of love, and from the plan of duty. So, this is also an indication of the level of our comprehension, conscience and merit. Do we, as individuals or as nations, expect some other person or persons to take responsibility for everything on behalf of us, so we can continue staying within our not-so-comfortable comfort zones? Or do we take responsibility for actions that need to be done for the betterment of our inner world, our family, friends, community, nation and humankind? Yes, these are closely related to the intuitions of the Plan of Duty.
Yes, let's continue reading. As to the manifestational way of these obligations, the realized obligations, with this realization, have already entered into applications of these truths. And each of these applications is an obligation as well. In this way, the application of certain truths imperatively results in the cooperation of certain comprehensions. And from that point on, the imperativeness of some cadres and organization systems emerges. Because of this, here, we need to talk about the cadres. This is a truth that no possible state in the universe is thinkable outside the necessity, imperativeness of evolution and the mechanism of destiny. There is nothing like arbitrariness. This principle is valid and unchangeable for all groups, all connections, and all cadres. Therefore, the cadres are the imperative results of the organization systems that need to be engaged in the universal mechanisms depending on the sublime necessities which are determinant in the execution of completions and fluxes in universe. Every organization system, in whichever cadre it should work, is built and performs according to it. So, establishment of the cadres should be in accordance with the basic principles, main mechanisms. For example, the performance of the mechanism of destiny which we talked about is regulated with the activities of organization systems which are established within certain cadres. Indeed, we already mentioned and discussed many points stated here. Still, to emphasize, let me mention that there is no arbitrariness. That the states in flux of all cadres executing their duties without conflicting each other. That they are always informed about each other's actions. The example you gave about the quantum processing was so beneficial. By the way, nowadays, quantum as a prefix is almost universally used. Quantum healing, quantum therapy, quantum family constellation, etc. I think, by using it as a prefix, people are trying to evoke that state of becoming of that harmony. Still, we may be overstretching this term. What do you think?
Yes, I see this prefix trend almost everywhere. Still, in our public lectures and in this series, we try to be careful in using this term. The divine order in the universe states what Einstein had said about relativity and time perception. What we read about spherical time comprehension in this book, that is, you cannot perceive, more correctly, you cannot understand it here in this world, you can only feel or have some intuitions about it in your meditations, or in your dream state. And Einstein explained all in his theory of relativity. We find the similar knowledge in Zen Buddhism, as well. In this sense, the most significant property of this book is its unifying our physical concepts with our spiritual concepts, which we had been considering as somehow separate. At some point, we even read how radioactivity is a factor in the emergence of the building blocks of matter. This was mind-blowing for me. I hadn't expected to read such a concept in a book compiled from spiritual communiqués. I am so thankful, because I became aware of the significance of the unity of spirit and matter first time when I read this book.
Yes, before the disclosure of this book, our spiritual approach was kind of against the material part of our existence. Even, distancing ourselves from material life was expected. Yet, this book is disclosed in 2013 and we read in the first page that everything is matter, even the concepts we consider as spiritual are of matter. And we learnt that unless we gave its due to matter, unless we complete the realities of various levels of matter, we cannot gain merit for becoming of that harmony we long for. Yes, let's reply at least one question from our dear friends, before we finish this video. One of them is, in that state of harmony with the divine orchestra, do the beings in duty put hard-to-read sheet music before the humans that are trying to learn playing their instruments, and hence, influence their development of intuitions?
Yes, an eloquent description. Just as learning a new and kind of hard talent, our brain goes under that process of harmonizing. Again, while meditating we invite our minds, our brains to enter a harmony. In other words, we stop the disharmony between left and right lobes, and harmonize them. Actually, this is valid in every field of our life.
The sheet music example in this question is so nice. I think all those hard-to-read musical notes are the points that are shaped in accordance with the needs of our being. Of course, these notes are delineated with the assistance of the being in duty, but these are outlined in our life plan, either because these are found wanting or lacking points during the accounting done in the spatium after each our past lifetime ends, or our being needs to move on to other lessons and experiences. So, these notes contain necessities and needs of our being. In this sense, the entire content of the sheet music is not written down by the beings in duty, but the composition on the sheet music is constantly changed in synchronization with the evolutionary needs of our spirit and the developmental needs of our being, as the vehicle of our spirit, in the cruder matter of the hydrogen cosmos. The beings in duty is interested in the harmony of the whole orchestra. And because of this, if there are times we don't want to play our instrument or we don't want to practice enough to master playing our instrument, of course they send influences to make us rethink our choices and decisions. Or maybe, we need to start playing another instrument at another section of the orchestra but we are reluctant to leave our familiar instrument. Then again, we receive influences from the beings in duty for directing us kindly or sometimes a little bit more urgently. From our perspective in the superficial time, this may appear as though they are forcing, imposing us. However, in the spherical time perception, those beings in duty have a much wider vantage point and observe all possibilities regarding our choices and decisions and where they may lead us. Please remember that all those influences from the beings in duty are still modulated in accordance our attitudes, choices, actions and decisions, and our efforts. Let's not forget this.
And we can easily deduce from the quantum processing example that things are not imposed on the beings in this system, because any time new data can be added to the system, and all output can be arranged accordingly at once, it is simultaneous, synchronous. The beings have the freedom of choice. And this is the purpose of the divine system, after all, allowing us to live the experiences so we can learn making choices that will help our development and evolution. This is the method of the cadres of beings in duty in the mechanism of destiny, responsible for the beings.
At this point, we need to remember and remind that the state we are in attracts the life we live. Therefore, it is now our turn to think about all that knowledge given in this book about the beings in duty, the mechanism, their merit and obligations. And we need to think deeply on finding out the ways of adapting that knowledge to our individual life events. Yes, dear Bilgehan, thank you so much. I hope our discussions and comments were beneficial for our dear friends. Hoping to see you all next week. Good evening.
Good evening, dear friends.